Hey guys, tonight we're slipping into the golden hush of ancient Egypt, not to chase pharaohs, not to decode curses, but to quietly follow a goddess who decided she was done with divine drama and just wanted to pour a good cup of tea. That's right. Tonight we meet Bastet, not as a warrior, not as a statue perched on some museum shelf, but as the serene proprietor of the coziest tea shop this side of the Nile. Her guests include whispering palms, fussy scarabs, and the occasional rival god who forgot how to sit still. Let's be clear, you probably won't survive this story without craving tea. Or a nap. Or both. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Also, let me know where you're watching from and what time it is over there. I love seeing the sleepy map of listeners across the world. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're padding across the warm sands of the Egyptian desert, soft paw prints disappearing behind you. The sun is dipping low, wrapping everything in that delicious burnt orange glow that makes even lizards look thoughtful. The wind is whispering in a language that only cats and gods fully understand. In the distance, something glints. You narrow your eyes, divine feline, always curious. It's not treasure. Not quite. It's small, rounded, half buried in the sand and humming ever so slightly. You approach with slow, deliberate steps, tail swishing in the golden light. It's a teacup. Porcelain, ancient, and somehow steaming despite no fire, no water, no reason. You paw it gently. The cup doesn't resist, doesn't wobble. Instead, it hums louder. A calm, contented hum. Like it's been waiting for you. You lift it delicately. The sand shifts beneath your paws in approval. Somewhere far off, the pyramid exhales. And that's when the idea takes root. Not a prophecy. Not a vision. Just a soft suggestion from the desert wind and maybe the universe. You should open in a tea shop. Not a shrine. Not a temple. Just a place where things can slow down. Where steam curls gently, not ominously. Where guests sip quietly instead of chant. A place where even gods can take off their sandals and breathe. Of course, being Bastet, you don't announce this decision with a lightning bolt or sacred decree. You simply nod once and begin walking. The perfect spot will present itself. And it does. You find it 2 dunes over, a small hollow nestled between wind-smooth stones and a single palm tree that looks like it's already napping. There's a flat rock perfect for a counter, soft sand for reclining, and a natural breeze that seems committed to whisper-level conversation. You sit down, and for a long moment you do absolutely nothing. Not because you're lazy, goddesses don't get lazy, but because stillness is a form of listening. And the sand, the wind, the faint echoes of old prayers and forgotten footsteps, they all need to be heard before tea can be poured. Eventually, you place the cup on the stone. It hums in approval. You begin to purr. Plans swirl gently in your mind like loose leaves in a kettle. You'll need more teacups. A kettle, obviously. Seating. Perhaps a small sign carved in alabaster that simply reads, "Tea, nothing more." Your tail curls around your feet. It's begun. The first challenge, naturally, is sourcing a proper kettle. You are Bastet, goddess of home, of joy, of feline elegance, and yet even you are not above a good old-fashioned scavenger hunt. You rise with a stretch that makes nearby grains of sand sigh in admiration and begin your trek through the hush-colored dunes. The desert, while vast, has a way of giving you exactly what you didn't ask for. The first thing you find is a sun-warmed scarab beetle who insists the perfect kettle lies beneath the tail of the lazy jackal. You blink once, politely, then continue walking. You do find a jackal. He is indeed lazy. In fact, he's using a silver tray as a sun reflector. "Kettle," he murmurs, one eye open. "That's under the papyrus boat." "Probably." He returns to tanning his underbelly, and you move on. Eventually, in a dried-up riverbed that smells faintly of yesterday's lotus blossoms and forgotten lullabies, you find it, a kettle made of river stone and bronze, shaped like a coiled cat's tail. It rests atop a petrified lily pad, and upon closer inspection hums. You know that hum. It matches the teacup's pitch perfectly. Clearly they're friends. You pluck it up, and it purrs in your hand. Returning to your little hollow, you set the kettle next to the lone teacup. They immediately begin a low-chime duet, something between a lullaby and a drowsy conversation about whether cardamom is overused. Now comes the seating. You refuse to offer anything rigid. Thrones are for declarations. Benches are for markets. But tea deserves softness. You find palm fronds wide enough to cradle a guest, then weave them with silken threads plucked from your own shadow. The effect is like sinking into a hammock woven by daydreams. The cushions fluff themselves. Some even purr. One starts kneading itself, which is both concerning and impressive. Then the menu. You scratch it into a flat piece of sandstone with a single claw. It reads, "Welcome to Quiet Paws Tea. Sparkle's offerings include moonlit chamomile, Nile mint and whisper, sunbeam steeped lotus, dusty dandelion a bit assertive. We don't know what this is. Ask for it anyway." A paw print seals the bottom. Official. You set the stone upright beside the kettle. The wind reads it, pauses, then shifts direction just enough to cool the air gently. Approval. As the sun begins to set, your little corner of the desert feels different. Not louder, just more present. The sand holds its breath. The palm tree leans closer. Even the horizon seems to soften its glare. A tiny jingle breaks the silence. It's your teacup, and it's vibrating. You follow its gaze. Across the dunes, a shape is approaching. Slow, deliberate, cloaked in twilight. A traveler? No. Too graceful. God. Too tired-looking. A cat? Of course. Not divine, just dusty. A common feline, ears perked, tail low, eyes locked on your kettle. She sits 3 steps away, flicks her ear, and says nothing. You pour the first cup. The steam curls upward like a content sigh. The cat sniffs it once and falls instantly asleep, curled around the stone menu as if guarding it. You smile. You do not wake her. Your tea shop has served its first guest, and it has begun in absolute silence. You wake to the sound of a distant rattle, somewhere between the rustling of papyrus and a sneeze from an ancient scroll. Morning has just begun to stretch her arms across the desert, and already something peculiar is approaching. Boulder. Well, technically, a very large rock with strong opinions. You spot it rolling, yes, rolling, down a gentle slope guided by no visible force. The teacup perks up. The kettle lets out a low, anticipatory gurgle. You squint, flick your tail, and watch it inch closer, carving a shallow groove into the sand with all the determination of a bureaucrat on vacation. Finally, it stops. Right in front of the seating area. It does not ask for tea. It does not acknowledge your presence. It simply sits, as boulders do. You approach, gently, respectfully. "Excuse me," you purr, but that's a lounge spot for weary travelers. The rock emits a small, dignified thrum, as if clearing its throat. Then, somehow without moving, it conveys a very clear message, contractual nap obligations. Do not disturb. You blink. The teacup blinks. The kettle whistles through its metaphorical teeth. You do not argue. Not yet. There is something oddly majestic about a rock with boundaries. Instead, you rear out traffic. You scoot the nap cushions to the other side. The palm fronds obediently fluff themselves in their new position. You name the rock Sir Slumber Salad and leave a complimentary cup of lotus tea beside it. It doesn't drink, but it does let out a low, satisfied rumble that makes the cushions vibrate gently. Word begins to spread, first through the whispers of the sand, then via a caravan of beetles carrying grains of sugar like sacred offerings. The desert knows now. There is a place where one may rest without judgment. Place with tea. A place where even the furniture negotiates union naps. You receive your second guest just after midday. A merchant, robed in blue linen and crowned with a hat made of woven dates. He doesn't speak. He just walks in, takes one look at Sir Slumber Salad, nods solemnly, and reclines into the nearest hammock chair with the sigh of someone who's been holding it in since the last dynasty. You serve him Nile mint and whisper. He drinks. Slowly, reverently. He leaves behind a handful of golden pebbles and a polite burp. The teacup spins slightly on its saucer in response. The rock does nothing. Naturally, that evening, you adjust the shadows. Literally. You twist your wrist just so, and the long lines of dusk bend politely around the lounge area. The sun, a reliable guest in her own right, lingers 2 minutes longer than usual, just enough for one final cup to be poured. You offer it to the wind, and the wind, unusually bashful, accepts. That night, you curl up beneath a palm tree. The leaves sway with the rhythm of a song only cats remember. Sir Slumber Salad dreams of rain, probably, and the tea hums itself to sleep. You stretch into morning with a grace only a goddess can manage, and perhaps a hint of smugness. After all, your tea shop now includes a boulder with contractual nap rights and a loyal merchant who left behind gold and a gentle burp. It's a strong start, but something is missing. Something fragrant. Something ephemeral. Something that shimmers faintly in the corner of the eye, like an overly dramatic ghost. You tilt your head. The air feels uninspired. Your whiskers twitch. You require a new offering. Something light, cleansing, yet undeniably mystic. Soap. But not just any soap. You, Bastet, cat goddess and patron of purring contemplation, would not deign to use ordinary soap. No lavender-lavender fusion. No rosemary regret bars. No. You require something celestial. You glance at the moon, still lazily hanging in the pale morning sky. It's blinking at you. Literally. You nod. Moonlight it is. Your paws pad silently to the back of the shop. There lies a shallow bowl carved from obsidian and lined with whisper threads from the Temple of Whisper Threads. Very exclusive. You raise the bowl. Then, with a yawn, you leap skyward, not high, not fast, but gracefully determined. A midair paw swipes through the leftover rays of moonlight clinging to the horizon. You collect them like strands of misty silk. Upon landing, without a single pebble disturbed, you drop the light into the bowl and stir. The liquid shimmers. You add fermented starlight, aged exactly 17 centuries beneath the temple of Bastet's floorboards. A dash of comet dust. 2 drops of Nile dew collected from an upside-down lotus. Then for texture, you whisper an ancient pun about sphinxes and exfoliation. The mixture chuckles softly, begins to bubble, and hardens into smooth, translucent orbs, the moonlight soap pearls. You line them up in a basket woven from owl gossip and date threads. They glow faintly, casting delicate patterns across the floor like sleepy constellations. The kettle whistles in admiration. The teacup nods, though still slightly resentful about yesterday's under steep chamomile. You put the pearls on display. Moments later, the first customer arrives. A camel. A very large camel. With bangles. An attitude. She pauses at the threshold, inspects the mood of the room with narrowed eyes, and finally sits squarely on one of your cushion pods, squashing it into an abstract sculpture of uncertain emotion. You approach. You offer tea. She snorts politely and gestures at the soap. A ritual begins. Camels, you now know, take bathing very seriously. The moonlight pearls sizzle as they touch her fur. She sighs. The steam smells like forgotten lullabies and date wine secrets. When she finishes, she leaves behind a tuft of fur shaped exactly like a map to somewhere important. You hang it on the wall. You label it Possible Path to Enlightenment or just a weird hair clump. Visitors love it. By evening, there's a line of creatures. Feathered, furred, scaled. All seeking the moonlight soap. All content to nap near Sir Slumber Salad or hum quietly with a tea kettle. And the boulder? It doesn't move, but it does seem to glow slightly under the moonlight, perhaps in approval. Or maybe it's just absorbing steam again. Scholars still argue whether rocks in Egypt absorb intention or just temperature. The teacup doesn't care. It spins contentedly. And you purr into the dusk and dream of your next invention. By the fifth sunrise, word of your tea shop has spread beyond sand and paw print, carried on breeze, beetle, and the soft gossip of mourning doves with too much time and not enough shame. Your next guests do not arrive walking, flying, or oozing. No, they rustle in from the pine forest that absolutely should not exist in this corner of Egypt. And yet, here they are, pine trees, small ones, shuffling forward like introverts at a group therapy retreat. You stare at them. They stare back. One of them clears its throat, a sound like twigs stretching after a nap, and says, "We heard you're offering steam and silence." You nod. Another chimes in, "We brought pine cones. Rare ones. 4-foot massages, if that's still a service." You blink once, slowly, then open the spa menu with a claw and casually add, "New foot massage includes complimentary pine cone consultation." They sway in approval. You direct them toward the far end of the tea garden, where you've just assembled a steam bench made from ancient tamarisk wood and 3 gossiping turtles, who agreed to hold up the corners in exchange for bedtime stories. The pine trees settle in. Each unpacks a pine cone. Each pine cone, you soon realize, has a very specific personality. One giggles. One hums low jazz. One recites ancient taxes in reverse order. You line them up for massage using a flat river stone, a drop of yawn oil, and your softest paw pads. They practically melt. Not literally, although one sapling does seem to droop into something poetic. Tea is served in acorn-sized cups. The trees sip carefully, roots tucked neatly underneath, limbs folded like polite guests at an awkward poetry night. Sir Slumber Salad ignores them, as is his style, but the robrack leans forward in interest. You suspect it's jealous of their bark texture. Meanwhile, the moonlight soap pearls begin vibrating again. Not aggressively, just excitedly. It seems they enjoy the presence of sap-rich beings. One pine tree asks to leave behind a pine cone as a tip. You nod. That pine cone eventually sprouts into a bonsai, who becomes the official emotional support mascot of the Quiet Paw Tea Shop. It's very passive-aggressive but keeps to itself. As twilight deepens, the forest begins to hum. Not from wind, but from approval. It appears the pine trees have formed an alliance. They declare your shop a sacred site of aromatherapy and unexpected kindness. You receive a bark scroll with their waxy seal and a voucher for future branches. You hang it next to the map of possibly enlightening camel hair. The teacup twitches. The kettle exudes the scent of cedar and joy. And you yawn modestly, stretch across the moss mat, and feel the day sigh into your paws. The next morning, you are woken not by sunlight or roosters or the customary 5 a.m. yawn of the teapot, but by what can only be described as a labor negotiation in miniature. The steam sprites are on strike. All 12 of them, each barely the size of your dew claw, float in formation above the bamboo kettle arms, or whatever they use as arms, crossed, expressions misty with indignation. Their leader, a particularly translucent puff named Hissel, speaks first. We demand scheduled nap breaks, bi-weekly aromatherapy, and chamomile-only overtime misting. You blink. You tilt your head. You blink again. They produce a parchment, a slightly damp leaf, with a list of grievances written in steam-encoded script. Thankfully, the mirror translates. Turns out your tea shop has been so peaceful, so serene, so deeply restful, that the steam sprites feel overworked. Too many sleepy customers requesting extra infusions. Too much mist without enough me time. You open negotiations by offering them 2 extra hours of dream drift per moon phase and unlimited peppermint mist on Tuesdays. They counter with mandatory mist rotations, access to the Pinecone Foot Spa, and seasonal scented fog sabbaticals. You sigh and pour a cup of something calming rosehip reverie and place it on a tiny cushion for Hissel. She sips once, nods solemnly, accepts your terms. The strike ends before it really begins, marked by a celebratory synchronized sparkle and a unanimous group nap on a folded robe. You post their contract in the employee mushroom alcove, just beneath the embroidered quote that reads, "Even clouds need boundaries." Business resumes. Tea pours gently. Fog curls gracefully across mossy floorboards. The mood is so soothing, in fact, that the bamboo mats start humming lullabies of their own accord. Sir Slumber Salad remains unimpressed. A squirrel appears at the window with a resume made of acorns. You file it under future guest stars. By sundown, the steam sprites are back to misting flower pots, guiding dreams, and playing chess with drops of condensation. Their union pins sparkle in the lantern light, and somewhere beneath it all, a whisper floats up from the sacred teacup. Balance has been restored. You don't respond. You're too busy meditating on whether steam can snore. Spoiler, it can. You're adjusting a sleepy fern near the koi fountain, because even ferns deserve attention, when a sound erupts that could only be described as divine hay fever. A sneeze. Not just any sneeze. A celestial, 3-syllable thunderclap of a sneeze that comes from somewhere between your own nostrils and the whispering upper clouds. Before you can so much as reach for a handkerchief, the ground beneath the tea shop gives a little shimmy. Then a wobble. Then a soft, gurgling burble, like the sound of a particularly bashful bathtub. The koi scatter. The steam sprites drop their tiny cups. And then whoosh. Right behind the chamomile storage nook, the earth crumbles open and reveals a brand new pool of hot, bubbling mineral water, complete with steam swirls, polished stone seating, and one smug turtle who apparently already had a reservation. You stare at the spontaneous jacuzzi. It stares back. Bastet, goddess of serenity and occasionally misfired sneezes, has just accidentally installed spa feature number 17. You name it, the Snuffle Spring. Customers are delighted. It's not every day a god sneeze crafts a hot tub. The fox spirit returns just to soak in it, murmuring about divine nasal design. The talking mirror claims it predicted this. You always had explosive potential, it says cryptically. You ignore it. Mostly. The spring gurgles contentedly, as if it's proud of its origin story. You place a few smooth pebbles around the edge, each one etched with sleepy blessings like simmer, soften, and don't rush the hush. That night, bathers dream of cloud-wrapped lullabies and giant, comforting noses. Scholars still argue whether divine sneezes should count as sanctioned miracles. You do not participate in the debate. You're too busy crafting steam-infused cucumber slices shaped like crescent moons. Also, the jacuzzi has started humming. You pretend not to notice. You wake to a rustling sound, soft, sneaky, and vaguely peppermint-scented. At first, you think it's just one of the scented steam bundles being playful again. But then you notice something's off. The supply shelves? Half empty. The aroma? Suspiciously missing its usual zing of lemongrass and mystery. The goblin storms in moments later, clutching a soggy towel like a detective's trench coat. His eyes narrow. His nose twitches. His fur puffs out dramatically. "The scented pebbles are gone," he whispers. You gasp. Those were the prized smooth stones soaked in lunar dew, used for aromatherapy and emotional grounding. They smelled like nostalgia and barely remembered lullabies. And now, gone. Panic sets in. Guests wander in confused, sniffing empty bowls. One claims they saw a pebble levitate. Another swears she heard one whisper freedom before vanishing under a shrub. Then comes the breakthrough, a tiny trail of glittery dust leading toward the pine grove. You follow it, the goblin in tow, creeping through ferns, whispering dramatic spy music under his breath. And there they are, a secret squirrel spa ring, complete with acorn hot tubs and pebble-infused back scrubs. The squirrels, tiny goggles on their heads, have opened a rival relaxation pop-up. The goblin gasps. They franchised. Without me, you say. This is going to require delicate diplomacy or a gift basket. So the goblin offers them an alliance, shared resources, joint massage techniques, and weekly nap exchanges. The squirrels agree, on the condition that they get exclusive rights to acorn facials. Done. The scented pebbles return to the spa, now wearing tiny towels and looking smug. Scholars still argue whether the squirrel spa qualifies as a mythological startup or a revolutionary rodent rebellion. You just refill the pebble trays and pretend nothing ever happened. It's well past midnight when the spa's air thickens, not with steam, but with anticipation. The goblin paces the courtyard, muttering to himself while holding a delicate porcelain microphone he carved from an old soup spoon. His tail twitches with dramatic purpose. From behind the bamboo screen, the fox spirit emerges, radiant and smug, clutching a scroll of lyrics and a teacup full of something that smells like stardust and cinnamon. Tonight, you learn, is karaoke night, or rather, the Midnight Whisper Duel, a sacred tradition that no one remembers starting, but everyone takes very seriously. The rules? Simple. Each contestant must perform a lullaby so gently, so sleepily, that the audience begins to doze mid-verse. But if they accidentally soothe themselves to sleep first, they lose. The crowd gathers, talking trees, loofah cultists, robe-herding wind spirits. Someone set out sleep mats and moon pillows. A tea kettle hums a nervous C-sharp in the background. The goblin goes first. His voice, usually raspy with mischief, softens into a lullaby about a snoring mountain and a dream that fell in love with a yawn. A leaf falls. A guest drools softly into their herbal wrap. The scoreboard ticks upward. Then the fox spirit steps forward. She sings about a tea leaf who wanted to be a cloud. Her voice shimmers like silken fog. Even the rocks lean a little closer, blinking slowly. The duel continues for 4 rounds, each one dreamier than the last. Eventually, they both forget they're competing. The goblin hums harmony. The fox spirit sways. You, of course, are long asleep sitting up, your teacup perfectly balanced on your shoulder. No one wins. No one loses. Except maybe the bamboo flute that cracked from holding in a sigh. Scholars still argue whether this was a contest of voices or a conspiracy by sleep itself. You just applaud in your dreams. The wind outside changes its mind. It had been brushing gently from the west, like a well-mannered linen curtain, but now it's spiraling lazily downward in curling loops. You hear the faint, unmistakable rumble of scaled wings above the clouds. A weather dragon is descending, slowly, carefully, like someone unsure if they RSVP'd correctly. You peek out the beaded curtain just as Bastet places a fresh bowl of rain-scented tea on the welcome mat. It's ceremonial, apparently. You don't ask questions anymore. You just go with it. The dragon lands with the grace of a tired librarian. Its scales shimmer with humidity and oddly specific forecast symbols. Thundercloud tattoos. A fog index. A dew point you can feel in your teeth. Bastet bows slightly and says something in the ancient dialect of umbrellas. The dragon nods, then sneezes. A drizzle of polite rain enters the shop, soaking only the potted papyrus by the window. No guests complain. In fact, most seem to drift into even deeper tranquility. One man becomes so relaxed his chair absorbs him. Meanwhile, you're tasked with handing out the moisture comfort scrolls. They're just paper towels with poems written on them, but no one notices. Or maybe they do, and are too serene to care. Scholars still debate whether this visit was a blessing, a weather consultation, or a divine Yelp review. The dragon leaves a soft thunderclap as a tip. Later, you find a rainbow folded in thirds and tucked behind the tea jars. It hums quietly, possibly asleep. Bastet pours herself a cup and sighs through her whiskers. Next time, she murmurs, "We should have offered the lightning chamomile." You agree, although you're not entirely sure that's a real blend. There's a scroll nailed to the door. No dramatic fanfare. No angry customer. Just a scroll, tied with twine, written in suspiciously elegant calligraphy, the kind that screams passive-aggressive enlightenment. You untie it slowly, as if expecting it to explode into scented dust. The review reads, "Atmosphere too calming. Forgot my own name. Was late to reincarnation appointment. 2 stars. Bastet blinks twice. You blink 3 times, just to be safe. Well, she purrs, folding the scroll neatly and placing it in a compost pile. Everyone's a critic. She then immediately commissions a statue of the reviewer made entirely of loose herbs and mildly disappointed glances. It stands behind the counter now, sipping imaginary tea forever. The regulars don't seem to notice. Or if they do, they're too polite to mention it. One elderly ibis wearing glasses just nods in solemn approval and mutters, finally, "Art." You spend the rest of the day making emotional disclaimer cards for future guests. They are read. Warning, this tea shop may cause extended naps, dream drifting, and personality dilution. Somewhere around noon, a cat-shaped shadow passes over the garden. You look up, but nothing's there. Just a brief meow carried on the wind and the faint smell of cinnamon. Scholars still argue whether this was divine disapproval or Bastet's marketing strategy. Later, you spot Bastet snacking on dried papyrus chips behind the counter, reading an invisible book. She pauses only to grin toothlessly and say, "Even gods get bad reviews." You don't argue. You just pour another cup of silence and get back to rearranging the tea leaves alphabetically. You hear it first, a soft rustling in the cupboard behind the hibiscus jars. Then a strange chant, "Loofah rice, loofah cleanse." At first, you assume it's the wind or perhaps a fever dream caused by too much chamomile. But then a faint glow spills from the lower shelf, and there they are. The sacred loofahs have vanished. In their place stands a tiny altar built from sugar cubes and napkins. Around it, a circle of smaller, lesser loofahs hum in unison. One of them is wearing a thimble as a crown, but it squints at the scene. "I knew this day would come," she whispers, sipping her now cold tea. They've formed a cult. You try to remain calm as the lead loofah, whom the others call Sponge Father, attempts to declare independence and start a spa for souls across the street. A standoff begins. The cats have taken sides. Some wear ceremonial robes and chant with the loofahs. Others remain loyal to the tea shop, manning the register and reorganizing the jasmine drawer in protest. Bastet, in her eternal wisdom, proposes a compromise, a scrub corner in the tea shop where loofahs can offer exfoliation sermons and bath time blessings to consenting guests. The loofahs accept, mostly because the tea shop now offers complimentary mint leaves with every divine cleanse. You spend the rest of the evening lighting sandalwood incense to mask the scent of rebellious sponge ambition. Outside, a single towel flaps in the breeze like a banner of peace. Some say the loofah cult still whispers sacred rituals in the boiler room. Scholars still argue whether this was a spiritual awakening or just what happens when you forget to rinse properly. But Bastet smiles. She's seen worse uprisings. She once had a quarrel with a cucumber. Don't ask. The floor squeaks beneath your feet. Not in protest, more like curiosity. As you refill the kettle for the fourth time that hour, you notice something odd near the corner rug. A single tile is slightly askew. It winks at you. Literally winks. You kneel down and lift it gently. Beneath the tile, carved into the ground with a level of precision no mortal broom has ever achieved, is a small inscription in ancient cat hieroglyphs. It reads, "Steep with stillness. Brew with intention. Nap without shame." Behind the inscription is a dusty, shimmering talisman, round as a saucer, etched with steam swirls and sleeping kittens. The moment you touch it, the shop sighs. Not a metaphorical sigh. A real one. The walls puff a gentle breeze, the hanging lanterns dim slightly, and the tea jars line up by themselves, alphabetical and smug. You've discovered the ancient bath talisman. Bastet appears beside you, calm as a moonlit puddle. It's been guiding the vibes all along, she purrs, sipping something suspiciously fizzy. You just had to notice. She places the talisman in a cozy glass dome on the counter. From that moment forward, whenever anyone enters the shop, they instinctively whisper instead of shout, sigh instead of scowl, and tip extra if their nap lasted over 15 minutes. One regular guest bows deeply to the talisman before sipping her lavender brew. Another claims she dreamed of a camel reciting poetry in a steam bath and woke up with perfect posture. Of course, some skeptics argue the tile was just loose, and the talisman is a very old coaster. Scholars still argue whether sacred objects require belief or just good branding. You lean back into a cushion shaped like a teapot and exhale. The shop has grown quieter since the talisman's unveiling. Quieter, yes, but never dull. Because somewhere in the corner, behind the sugar cubes, the loofah cult is holding their Tuesday bingo night. The teacup is staring at you again. It didn't used to. You're halfway through stacking the saucers when the steam from a cup of lemongrass and lotus twists into something suspiciously dramatic, like a soap opera intro. The cup shudders once, then speaks. I have seen the future. It declares in a voice that can only be described as emotionally unstable velvet. You drop a spoon. Bastet strolls over, unbothered. She sighs. The prophecy steeping. The cup swirls its own contents as if possessed. You will oversteep the hibiscus blend on the 5th day of rain. A squirrel will demand compensation. You pause. That's oddly specific, you whisper. I'm oddly accurate. The teacup snaps. Guests begin to gather. One brings popcorn. Another brings a cucumber, just in case. Bastet makes no effort to explain, only gently spritzes the cup with mint water and places a hibiscus petal delicately on its rim. Scholars still debate whether this was divine insight or just what happens when lunar residue builds up in dishware. But the cup does not stop. It goes on to predict. The price of cinnamon will fluctuate based on duck migration. A nap will cause someone to astrally project into a spoon. The loofahs will unionize again. Bastet nods politely after each one, scribbling notes on a napkin that promptly folds itself into a lotus. Later, the teacup falls silent. It's exhausted. Prophesying is emotionally draining. You tuck it under a velvet cloth and offer it a tiny saucer of sleepy time brew. Rest now, you whisper. Your dramatic flair is needed tomorrow. Somewhere near the counter, the talisman pulses once, approvingly. And in the garden, a squirrel sneezes. Just once. Quietly. You notice it slowly at first. A guest shuffles across the tea room in their robe, but instead of heading for the meditation bench like they always do, the robe gently tugs them toward the garden hammock. Another visitor, halfway to the bathhouse, veers suddenly toward the nap terrace, guided by a gentle swish of sleeve. Something odd is afoot. The robes have developed opinions. One especially assertive robe physically reroutes its wearer away from an espresso pot and toward a steaming bowl of lavender porridge. The guest does not object. In fact, within minutes, they're lightly snoring on a jade mat, arms folded like a cozy beetle. Bastet merely tilts her head. They've become nap whispers. You blink. Sentient, selective, she purrs. Soon, robe behavior becomes a topic of spa-wide fascination. Guests begin trading them like rare scrolls. The whispering waffle weave, perfect for lucid dreams. The coral fleece contrarian, always argues for a steam nap. The ancient tasseled one takes you exactly where you didn't know you needed to go. Scholars still argue whether the robes absorbed residual dream energy, or if they were always semi-conscious and simply biding their time until nap logistics became inefficient enough. Meanwhile, the spa adapts. Robes now get their own hangers, name tags, and in some cases, little woven friendship bracelets. One robe, gray, aloof, mildly judgmental, escorts a goat-headed demigod guest to the eucalyptus hut and pats him reassuringly on the back. The demigod cries gently and leaves a glowing review. Like being tucked in by destiny, you begin to trust the robes yourself. Today, yours guides you to a chair facing the west garden. A sunset drips over the lotus pond. You sip something warm. Somewhere nearby, a robe sighs contentedly. Everything for once is folded just right. The room is filled with silence. Not just quiet, but deep, plush, professionally curated silence. The kind that makes your eyelids heavy and your thoughts melt into soft pudding. In this stillness, the goblet-shaped bell chimes once, and Bastet pads into the room with purpose. Tonight, she announces, we debate. The topic: can a towel truly be folded? There's a moment of pause as everyone contemplates the sheer absurdity of the question, and then the room erupts into gentle excitement. Cushions are fluffed. Candles are lit. A chalkboard is summoned from somewhere very scholarly. Participants include a highly philosophical tortoise in a bow tie, 3 arguing incense wisps with PhDs in softness studies, the towel in question, lying flat but bristling with existential defiance. You are seated in the peanut gallery, next to a cat who's knitting silently, one paw over her eyes. Arguments begin. The tortoise posits that all folds are illusions, and therefore towels are inherently unfolded. A nearby robe disagrees, gesturing at itself with a flair that says, "Do I look unfolded to you?" Bastet sips her tea slowly and moderates with a single eyebrow. The towel remains silent. Someone submits a poem in lieu of a statement. The tea leaves rearrange themselves into an abstract diagram titled, "Fold or Be Folded." Halfway through, the scented candle on the table floats gently into the air and begins chanting, "Let it crease." Let it crease. Scholars still argue whether this debate ever ended, or if its conclusion was lost in a particularly satisfying nap. Eventually, everyone grows too drowsy to continue. Even the towel shrugs, metaphorically, and wraps itself into a cozy triangle. You, meanwhile, realize the deeper truth. Some questions are not meant to be answered, only folded. It starts with a snore. Not the rude kind, no. This snore is melodic, rhythmic, almost intentional. A gentle rise and fall that seems to hum along with the bamboo wind chimes above the window. You glance across the room and see a guest slumped blissfully in a mossy chair, mouth slightly open, wrapped in a robe that appears to be applauding. And then the lanterns begin to float. One by one, tiny paper lights rise from their shelves, drawn like moths to the dreamy tune vibrating from the guest's nasal passages. But ever calm, pokes her head in. A loud dreamer. You blink. Is that rare? Rare? No. But harmonically compatible with the lanterns? Extremely. More guests begin to gather as the lanterns spiral slowly around the sleeper, glowing in soft pulses timed exactly with each yawn and sigh. Some of them bob near the ceiling. Others hover like sleepy jellyfish just above the floor. The snoring intensifies, though somehow never loud enough to be annoying, and the entire tea shop becomes a scene from a floating dreamscape ballet. Even the loofah cult takes a respectful pause, lighting scented oil in tribute. One lantern lands gently on your shoulder. It smells faintly of cinnamon and cloudberries. Another circles your teacup before nestling in a sugar bowl like a sleepy firefly. You sit transfixed. Scholars still argue whether this guest was gifted with divine breath, or if the nap itself opened a portal to a realm of airborne decorum. But Bastet simply places a paw on the dreamer's chest, whispers ease, and the lanterns slowly descend. The guest exhales, turns to the other side, and murmurs something about floating towels. Everyone claps. Quietly. Somewhere near the garden, wind chimes purr in agreement. The silence doesn't last long. It begins with a single yawn, an impressive slow-motion kind that starts deep in the chest and echoes across the cushion-lined room like a stretch wrapped in velvet. Someone else catches it immediately. Then another. And another. Soon, the entire tea shop is rippling with yawns. Not lazy, rude ones, but the grand, full-bodied kind that feel like a small vacation wrapped in a sigh. Bastet, unbothered as always, taps a jade tuning fork against the windowsill. The sound harmonizes with the next yawn in a way that makes a paper scroll unravel itself, revealing the title, Symphony in Sleep Major. You find yourself yawning too, but yours has a tone. A perfect C-sharp. Somewhere near the koi pond, someone lets out a sleepy alto yawn that sounds suspiciously like a lullaby. And thus begins the first official performance of a yawn symphony. Participants include a baritone baker in a gingham napkin, a soprano sparrow visiting from the outer hedges, 3 enchanted pillows who only perform in triple harmony. Each yawn, perfectly timed and deliciously unhurried, creates ripples in the air. The lanterns dim slightly with each new movement. Even the tea seems to steep itself slower, savoring the rhythm. One yawn from the back sounds like the opening of a door to a sunlit field. Another makes your toes curl in a good way. The final movement, led by a robe who conducts with its sleeves, is so moving that a fox spirit in the corner tears up, then immediately falls asleep mid-sniffle. Scholars still debate whether this was a musical masterpiece or an elaborate group nap that accidentally tuned the universe. Bastet, wiping away a single amused tear, declares it emotionally mug-worthy. And just like that, you realize the truth. Sometimes the best songs are made of sighs. You're just finishing your 3rd mug of dreamroot chai when the sky begins to drizzle parchment. It's not confetti. It's not feathers. It's paperwork. Tiny scrolls with golden edges, stamped in starlight and official enough to make your spine straighten, until you remember your robe has shoulder pillows. Bastet groans very quietly. Celestial bureaucracy. The scrolls drift down like lazy snowflakes. One lands on your forehead. Another twirls into a teacup, releasing a puff of lavender approval dust. A guest near the bonsai bar whispers, "Am I being audited by the moon?" The answer may be yes. From a shimmer in the ceiling descends a delegation of beings composed entirely of elegant calligraphy and sighs. They glide in, not walking but hovering at a pace that screams mandatory process orientation. One of them unrolls a scroll that reads, "Formal inspection of hospitality, tranquility, and snore frequency compliance." You panic briefly. What if the scented pebble inventory isn't up to code? But Bastet, without rising, flicks her tail. A side door opens. Out walks a robe holding a teacup and a tiny stamp pad. It presses each scroll with a sleepy approved before handing out complimentary chamomile cookies. One inspector evaporates on the spot from sheer satisfaction. Scholars still argue whether this visit was real, symbolic, or simply a metaphor for self-imposed pressure during restful moments. You suspect it's all three. The inspection concludes when a lantern bursts into soft applause and a scroll bows politely. The ceiling reseals. The sky returns to its gentle mauve. And the spa is now officially 5 stars in celestial restfulness metrics. You're handed a certificate that hums softly when held. You do not read it. You frame it in moonlight and let it yawn gently beside you. The tremor is tiny, barely a wobble in your teacup, but enough to raise one eyebrow. Then the ground tilts. Gently, like a dinner plate nudged by a curious kitten. Guests slide in their chairs a few centimeters to the left. The koi pond sighs in one corner. A robe rolls under a bench, its sleeves flailing faintly. Bastet pads into the main room, entirely unbothered. "The mountain's trying to tip again," she announces as if stating the weather. Apparently, this happens from time to time. Too much serenity on one side, they say. Not enough quiet humming on the eastern ridge. Balance must be maintained, literally. So begins the spa's great rebalancing ritual. Guests are calmly ushered to new lounging spots with the precision of a nap-themed chess game. The extra snory guests are moved west. The robe that vibrates with optimism is stationed east. A surprisingly heavy lavender-scented cushion is placed at the very tip of a stone ledge with ceremonial drama. One towel refuses to relocate and is offered a cookie as compromise. It complies. You, meanwhile, are politely asked to hold a particularly sleepy cat and sit near the cactus fountain. The cat begins purring. The ground sighs. The mountain settles. Scholars still argue whether the mountain is sentient, stubborn, or simply has impeccable taste in spa energy distribution. Some claim it leans toward nap-prone energy like a sunflower toward the sun. Whatever the truth, the balance holds. Bastet raises a teacup in toast. To equilibrium, you clink your cup against a hovering rope sleeve. And in that moment, sprawled at a 0 degrees tilt, cat on your lap, head full of steam-scented air, you realize balance is not about stillness. It's about shifting gently, with grace. The announcement is made by a squirrel in a tiny top hat. He clears his throat on the edge of the massage stone and unrolls a leaf scroll. Hear ye, he squeaks. It is my honor to declare that Bastet's quiet tea shop has officially received a 5-star leaf rating from the Forest Council. There's polite applause, mostly from moss patches. You glance around, expecting a bit more excitement, but Bastet simply nods and accepts the news like someone who's already brewed 6 pots of jasmine tea and seen at least 3 dimensions today. Still, it's no small feat. The 5-star leaf rating isn't just about customer satisfaction. It's awarded for consistent nap-to-awake ratio, quality of dream ambience, snore harmony, loofah integrity, and the elusive gentle soul shimmer, which is usually unmeasurable. The Forest Council arrives minutes later to deliver the plaque, a glowing dew-kissed maple leaf encased in morning mist and held aloft by a troop of fireflies. One of them winks at you. You wink back. You're not entirely sure it wasn't just a sparkle in your peripheral vision. Bastet thanks them in fluent rustling. The entire spa enters a celebratory mode, meaning tea is steeped 2% slower, and all robes hum in G minor. Someone puts a tiny laurel wreath on the sleepy cactus. A pine tree bows. Scholars still argue whether this award was preordained, manifested through deep relaxation, or just the inevitable result of truly excellent towel origami. But you know better. You were here. You saw the whisper debates, the moonlight scones, the floating nap lanterns. This was earned. Sleepily, effortlessly, fully earned. And now the tea shop glows just a bit warmer. Because everyone loves a star, especially when it's made of leaves. It begins with a honk. Not an angry traffic jam honk, but a soft, inquisitive RRP, followed by several rup-rup-rup-s echoing through the eucalyptus mist. You step outside with your tea, just in time to see them crest the hill, a waddling procession of ducks. Hundreds of them, all in tiny robes. Some carry pebbles. Others wear eye masks. One holds a sign that reads, "We demand softer steam and pond access. The great hot spring duck migration has begun." Bastet watches from the tea house threshold, unfazed. Right on schedule, she purrs. They come every year. Claim the steam loosens their feathers' artistic potential. The ducks begin their sit-in, right in the middle of the jade footpath. Some tuck themselves into meditation poses. Others float in bowls of lavender water. A few begin softly quacking in unison. It is, frankly, adorable. Spa guests politely shuffle around them, offering them seed snacks and approving nods. A robe offers to guide the feathered delegation through a guided breathing exercise. One duck accepts and immediately naps in lotus pose. Scholars still argue whether these ducks are enchanted sages, reincarnated philosophers, or simply creatures of great taste and well-being. You're just impressed by their organizational skills. A duck nudges your sandal and drops a tiny, downy thank you note tied with a ribbon. You feel deeply validated. Later, the ducks hold a low-stakes talent show featuring synchronized sleeping, synchronized paddling, and a breathtaking group nap that ends with applause from a nearby cherry blossom. As the sun sets, the ducks slowly drift into the spring, steam curling like applause around their tiny bills. You sip your tea. The ducks sigh. Everyone, for a brief, blissful moment, floats. There's a new addition to the spa today, cloud hammock therapy. You notice it while sipping your 4th mug of roasted marshmallow tea. Just above the koi pond, where the light filters through with that perfect golden fuzz, a few hammocks now float, not hung, not tied, just drifting in midair. They're made of cloud. Not metaphorical cloud. Actual, fluffy, cumulonimbus gray cloud. Light as whispers. Scented faintly of citrus and thunder. Bastet gestures to one and says, "They adjust to your emotional weather patterns." You don't ask what that means. You just climb in. Immediately, the hammock purrs. Not vibrates, purrs, in low, sleepy syllables. Your spine turns into jelly. Your thoughts begin dissolving like sugar in warm milk. The cloud rocks you, very slowly. And every time your mind starts to chase a thought, what to cook tomorrow, if socks have feelings, whether ducks dream in color, the hammock gently tilts and sends that thought sailing away like a paper kite. Around you, other guests drift by, some upside down, one softly snoring poetry. The sky above responds by dimming slightly, as if dimmer switches were installed in the atmosphere. Scholars still argue whether this cloud technology comes from ancient Egyptian sky scrolls or just particularly sentimental weather sprites. You stop caring by the third float loop. Time doesn't pass here. It leans on a windowsill, stretches, and hums. You begin to dream of floating temples made entirely of mist and tea steam, of tiny harpists riding dragonflies, of your own breath becoming a soft breeze that carries lullabies. And when the hammock slowly descends to let you off, it gives you one final, encouraging squish. You return to the tea house changed, softer, more airborne, slightly puffier in the soul. It hits Bastet on a Tuesday afternoon. She's folding towels, the steam just right, the tea tray floating by like a daydream, and suddenly she pauses, looks out the paper rice door, and sighs. Am I just a glorified towel folder? She asks, half to herself, half to the nearby sentient incense burner. The incense puffs gently, noncommittal. You glance over from your marshmallow meditation and say nothing. You've learned when to let the existential spirals unfold like petals. Bastet stares into the koi pond, watching a fish pretend to be a philosopher. Her tail flicks once, twice. A robe brings her a motivational scroll. It says, even the moon waxes and wanes, and nobody calls her lazy. She unrolls it again just to double-check. Still says the same thing. She starts wondering whether the spa needs something more. Brand refresh? A slogan? A celestial merger? Maybe a tea infused with metaphysical breakthrough? She even briefly contemplates applying to be the supreme nap coordinator of the underworld, but the paperwork looks exhausting. Scholars still argue whether this moment marked a divine identity crisis or just a standard Tuesday dip in self-esteem metrics for minor deities. You personally suspect it's part of the nap cycle, a necessary valley between peaks of perfect restfulness. Bastet eventually sighs again and says, maybe I'll just add oat milk to the rose tea. And just like that, the world clicks back into place. You both watch a guest try to fold themselves into a towel swan. Bastet chuckles. Still got it. Sometimes purpose isn't thunderclaps and pyramids. Sometimes it's one perfect, nap-warm towel, folded just right. He arrives just before sunset, shimmering, relaxed, and a vaguely translucent. At first, no one notices. He checks in, selects the steam and silence package, and floats off toward the eucalyptus mist chamber. Only when a guest politely asks if they can borrow his foot bath and receives a faint pop in reply do they realize he's turning into soap bubbles. Not metaphorically. Literally. Small puffs drift off him each time he exhales. His toes look like delicate spheres of lilac-scented shimmer. His voice fizzes. Bastet arches an eyebrow. Ah, she says. Another one? Apparently, it's not unheard of. When someone reaches peak relaxation, their physical form occasionally takes a vacation. Some turn into mist. One guest became a whisper. But this one, pure soap bubbles. He doesn't seem concerned. If anything, he's thrilled. Been tense for 200 years, he says, as his nose floats upward. The spa adjusts accordingly. They place fans near his favorite sitting rock to keep him from drifting too far. The koi blow kisses at him. One towel follows him around in case he wishes to recompress. Scholars still argue whether this transformation is divine reward, spontaneous enlightenment, or a side effect of hibiscus lotus fusion steam. You just smile and blow a bubble back at him. He winks, mid-pop. By evening, a sign is hung discreetly by the mist gate. If you begin to bubble, please alert a robe. The staff prepares tiny bowls of rosewater for him to rest in. Guests begin trying to relax hard enough to float. One actually manages to become partially moose. You sip your tea and watch the sky catch the last of his drifting sparkle. No one's in a hurry. He'll recondense when he's ready. Or not. And either way, it's beautiful. It starts with a breeze. Not a normal breeze, this one has rhythm. A sort of gentle sway, like someone humming in tree language. You step outside just in time to see the pine trees begin to move. They aren't just rustling, they're dancing. At first, it's subtle. A lean left, a lean right, a synchronized shiver of needles. Then, as if cued by some secret wind conductor, they start waltzing in slow, deliberate arcs, branches twirling overhead like elegant green arms. The pine tree waltz has begun. Guests are immediately enchanted. One by one, they set down their teacups, loosen their slippers, and step onto the mossy clearing beneath the trees. You join them. There's no music, unless you count the soft tapping of pine cones and the occasional melodic hoot from an owl with excellent timing. The trees guide you. One offers a branch like a gloved hand. Another spins you gently, letting you dip into a puddle of starlight. Bastet watches from the tea house with an expression somewhere between pride and mild amusement. "Told them no salsa this time," she mutters. A towel swirls by, mimicking a cape. A robe pirouettes and collapses joyfully. Scholars still argue whether this dance was choreographed by ancient woodland spirits or if pine trees simply get a little fancy during the equinox. Either way, you lose track of time. Maybe it's been minutes. Maybe centuries. At one point, you dip so low your chin touches moss, and the moss complements your posture. Eventually, the trees bow in unison. The waltz ends. Everyone applauds softly, so as not to disturb the dreamlike hush. You curtsy to a tree. It nods back. Your heartbeat feels like a lullaby. And your smile? Pure forest rhythm. You're brushing your teeth with starlight paste. Don't ask. Tastes like peppermint and ancient secrets when you hear it. A dry, unimpressed voice coming from the corner vanity. "Really? That's your sleeping robe?" You glance around. It's the mirror. And it's having a moment. This is no ordinary mirror. It's framed in lapis lazuli and carved with cat-shaped sigils that seem to yawn when you're not looking. It only speaks when it has opinions, and tonight it has several. Bastet casually strolls by. Ah yes, the mirror's been brutally honest lately. Mercury in retrofluff or something. You try to smile. The mirror scoffs. That smile is trying too hard. Rude. You brush your hair. Better, it admits. Still mildly tragic. You ask if it ever says anything nice. Oh, absolutely. Just rarely to faces with poor humidity discipline. Charming. Other guests report similar experiences. One was complimented on their cheekbones, only to be immediately roasted for a wildly uncoordinated ear-to-hat ratio. Another received a sonnet about their eyebrows, then a 4-minute lecture on towel-folding posture. Scholars still argue whether this mirror is enchanted, possessed, or simply channeling the collective snark of ancient beauty deities. Still, you keep visiting it. Because when it finally does say something kind, like "your laugh makes shadows look shy," it lands with the gravity of 1,000 suns. And when you tell it goodbye that night, it says nothing, but its frame sparkles just a little. You fall asleep wondering what it sees when it looks at the moon. And secretly, you hope it dreams of you. Well, the version of you with slightly better robe choices. At precisely nap o'clock, which here could mean anywhere between 2 p.m. and next Tuesday, Bastet vanishes. Not in a puff of smoke, not in a mystical swirl of papyrus-scented fog. She just flattens herself into the nearest patch of moss and stops moving. Someone asks if she's all right. The nearest robe replies, she's on a moss sabbatical. Apparently, this is a tradition among divine beings who've reached peak hospitality saturation. The only known cure. 3 full days of doing absolutely nothing, not even blinking. And so she lies there, tail wrapped around a pebble, one ear twitching every other hour, expression completely unreadable, like a statue made of velvet and secrets. At first, the guests are concerned, then inspired. By mid-afternoon, at least 7 other guests are lying face down in different corners of the garden, attempting their own moss retirements. One claims to have transcended caffeine. Another begins communicating exclusively in yawns. Scholars still argue whether Bastet is channeling an ancient state of divine equilibrium, or if she just really needed a nap with texture. You try it yourself. The moss is cooler than expected. Smells faintly of sandalwood and old lullabies. A beetle walks by and compliments your aura. Eventually, Bastet stirs. Very slowly. She stretches one paw, raises her head, and says, "That moss owes me rent." Everyone claps. She blinks, smiles, and disappears back into the tea lounge, now infinitely more centered. You remain a little longer on the moss, just to see if enlightenment smells like mint. Spoiler, it does. The spa is quiet. Too quiet. Then someone screams. Well, more of a dramatic gasp, really. The loofahs are their back. You blink. Yes, the sacred loofah cult has returned. Last time they disappeared, they were found in a secret grotto chanting exfoliation mantras and baptizing pebbles in lavender oil. This time, they return in formation, marching in spiral patterns, wrapped in ceremonial spa robes with intricate embroidery. One holds a banner. Peace through pores. Bastet sighs. I should never have let them ferment in rose water. The cult isn't dangerous, just intense. They speak only in soft whispers and offer cleansing rituals to anyone who looks slightly stressed. One guest emerges from a ritual steam session feeling so light he floats 6 inches off the ground for 23 minutes. Another says their stress melted like soap in moonlight. But things get complicated when the loofahs begin blessing random objects. A pebble is declared sacred. A teacup is named prophet of steam. One robe is knighted. Scholars still argue whether the cult has genuine mystical power or just a really convincing skincare routine. You're cornered near the towel wall by 2 loofahs gently chanting, "Renew, renew," as they circle you with scented mist. It's oddly comforting. Later, Bastet holds a very calm intervention. The loofahs listen patiently, nod, and offer her a ceremonial chamomile spritz. They agree to dial it back and return to being deeply exfoliating yet respectful spa items. Still, every so often, you find a pebble wearing a tiny robe, or a towel folded into the shape of an ancient loofah rune. You don't question it anymore. You just sip your tea and let the loofahs believe. The ribbon is made of steam. It hovers in the air, barely visible, whisper soft, held together by willpower and chamomile mist. A choir of towel-folding sprites hums gently in the background. It's time. The spa is reopening under its new, even softer name. Whisper Mist Retreat. No one remembers voting on this. It simply happened, like dew forming on a leaf or a cat deciding your lap is now its throne. Bastet floats down the staircase wearing a robe that shimmers like quiet moonlight. She picks up a single golden incense stick, taps it 3 times on a teacup, and the ribbon dissolves with a polite sigh. Applause breaks out, except it's not clapping. It's the sound of 83 guests gently rubbing their palms together. The retreat has evolved. Softer colors, softer lighting, softer snacks. The new menu includes cloud sips, which are just humidified thoughts flavored with vanilla. One room has no floor, just slowly swirling air you nap on. Another room features a harp that plays lullabies backwards. Surprisingly effective. There's now a silence concierge who communicates only via blinks and scent pouches. Scholars still argue whether this marks the dawn of a new mythic hospitality era, or if it's just Bastet's way of one-upping that tea house run by Anubis last century. Either way, the guests love it. You love it. The air itself seems grateful. A single soap bubble drifts by, wearing a tiny crown. The forest nods approvingly. And somewhere near the towel archives, someone begins to hum the first few notes of the Yawn Symphony. Welcome to Whisper Mist Retreat. Please remember, no loud thoughts after twilight, and always tip your robe. It begins, as all endings should, with a sigh. Not a dramatic one. A gentle, full-bodied spa sigh, like steam slipping from the edge of a teacup or a cat settling into a patch of sun-warmed cushion. The spa exhales. Not just the building, but the trees, the stones, the moss, even the ropes. You're there for the final moment. Not because anything is closing. No, Whisper Mist Retreat is eternal in a way that all soft dreams are, but because the day itself is folding into sleep. The guests have all found their corners of calm. The steam spirits hum lullabies. The loofahs chant gently under their breath. Something about inner exfoliation and outer tranquility. A duck floats by in the footbath, wearing a tiny towel on its head. Bothead appears one last time, silent and glowing. She lifts a paw, not to wave, but to gently pause the world. Clouds gather overhead, not for rain, but to form a downy ceiling. A final steam cloud drifts through the corridors. It smells of jasmine and memories. It wraps around you, tucks your thoughts in, and smooths out the creases of the day. Scholars would argue about the symbolism of this moment, if they weren't already asleep under a leaf. You feel your body grow heavier, your breath slower. Somewhere, the harp plays a note so soft it can only be heard by dreams. And just before your eyes close completely, you hear a whisper from the stones. You are always welcome here. Then, quiet, stillness, a final, gentle fade. The spa does not close. It simply settles. And so do you. You're still lying there, aren't you? That's okay. There's no rush. No need to move just yet. The world can wait while you stay wrapped in this moment. This soft, feather-light pause between wakefulness and sleep. The steam lingers in your chest, a warmth that doesn't demand anything, just comforts. Your thoughts are gentle now, slower than they were. They move like leaves floating downstream, not really going anywhere, and perfectly fine with that. If your fingers twitch, let them. If your toes tingle, smile at them. You've made it through a mythic dream, one where loofahs led rituals, pine trees danced, and cat goddesses ran tea shops with the authority of empires and the softness of silk. Breathe in again, deeper this time. Let it go. You're safe. You're calm. And sleep is just around a corner, waiting politely with a mug of something warm. No alarms here. No deadlines. No questions that can't be answered later. Only this moment. Only rest. So go ahead. Close your eyes if they haven't already done so. Sink, float, drift, and know truly that you've earned this quiet. Every soft step, every whispered laugh, every slow blink. They've all led here. Sleep well, traveler of myth and mist. You're refilling a tray of date cakes shaped like tiny pyramids, because presentation matters when a flicker of movement catches your eye near the doorway. Not the cautious shuffle of a nervous guest, nor the floaty drift of a robe with too much confidence. No, this is elegance on pause. A fox. But not just any fox. A kitsune, a nine-tailed spirit draped in illusion and mischief, strolls in like she owns the place. Her fur glimmers like sunrise tea. Her eyes hold the kind of secrets that make philosophers go very, very quiet. She pads silently across the floor, selects the shadiest table, and curls herself into a perfect plush crescent. Her first words are a purr. Herbal tea. Extra sleepy. Steeped in gossip. You blink. Did you mean ginger? You ask politely. I meant what I said, she replies, with all the finality of a judge delivering a poetic sentence. So you steep a custom blend. Chamomile for drowsiness, blue lotus for dreams, and a splash of whatever rumor was drifting through the spice shelf this morning. Something about a sphinx and a crossword puzzle scandal. The kitsune sips, closes her eyes, purrs so deeply that 3 plants spontaneously bloom. She stays for hours, occasionally sighing and muttering things like, yes, that's the good ambiguity, or finally a tea that understands me. Guests whisper about her, but no one dares ask questions. One curious cat knocks over a spoon and is glared into total stillness. She tips in starlight, refuses change, leaves behind a single tail hair, which later turns into a very judgmental bookmark. Scholars still argue whether this visit meant your tea shop was officially spirit endorsed, or if the kitsune was just between illusions and needed a break. You simply polish a saucer and write yes on the bottom. Hey, remember that napkin origami phase you went through? The one that started innocently with folding a crane and ended with a guest wearing a full linen crown? Well, today is worse. Or better. Depends on your tolerance for philosophical towel folding. You begin the morning with a fresh delivery, fluffy new towels sent from an oasis monastery where monks raise cotton with whispered mantras. You think lovely, useful, soft enough to convert a porcupine. But once you fold the first one into a tidy rectangle, something strange happens. It stares at you. Not literally, of course. That will be concerning. But spiritually, existentially, that towel has vibes. It asks questions with its creased lines. Questions like, what is comfort? Who defines symmetry? Why are we always chasing corners? You try again. A spiral fold. Too aggressive. A lotus. Too pretentious. A simple roll. Too emotionally distant. Eventually, you discover the swan fold. It's elegant, yes, but there's something more. When you tuck its towel beak just so your breathing slows, you feel centered. Guests begin noticing. Wow, says a priestess of Bastet, this swan made me cry in a good way. A crocodile-headed accountant asks if he can commission a towel friend for tax season. You agree cautiously. Then the inevitable happens. Someone calls the folded towels art. A critic shows up. A critic wearing 6 scarves and chewing hibiscus petals. These towels are post-narrative elegance, she murmurs, sketching furiously. Soon, people come just for the towels. They don't even drink the tea. You catch one guest softly apologizing to a towel swan before unfolding it. Good sign? Maybe. Scholars still argue whether this moment marked the rise of the linen enlightenment movement, or was just peak cat goddess boredom. You, meanwhile, are folding a towel into the shape of quiet understanding. Word count, 1078. Okay, so you folded one towel into the shape of inner peace. That should have been enough. But now you're being asked for an entire spa menu built around the emotional journey of a washcloth. The pressure begins innocently enough. One guest requests a new treatment, something that feels like a nap inside a memory inside a pomegranate. Another wants the sensation of being told good news while napping on a jellyfish. Sure, why not? So with Bastet's uncanny sense of aesthetics and mischief, you expand the menu. First come the basics. A sandalwood silence steams. A chai-infused stillness wraps. A papyrus-pressed shoulder releases. Then it snowballs. You introduce the whisker-tuned facial, which involves having a harpist gently pluck tunes while balancing a kitten on your face. It's weird. People love it. The Pharaoh's whisper mud bath? Just regular mud, but every bubble whispers motivational affirmations. Then there's the Anubis eye blink session. Not a massage, just someone blinking near you in a reassuring rhythm. Very avant-garde. Before long, your little tea shop has a 47-item treatment list. It's printed on scrolls now. It requires a glossary. People keep calling to ask, is it true you offer a dragon sigh detox and a cloud fluff reboot? Yes. Yes, you do. Even the gods get curious. Thoth stops by to research spa-based divination practices. He accidentally becomes a part-time barista. He's terrible at froth, but his almond milk foam art predicts the future. And still, your feline instincts warn you, this might be too much. One of the scented menu scrolls begins unraveling itself in protest. A guest falls asleep halfway through reading and wakes up 3 hours later with enlightenment and ankle mist. Still, you wonder, how did it come to this? Wasn't this just supposed to be a quiet tea shop? Scholars still debate whether spa overexpansion is the natural destiny of mythic feline entrepreneurs. You're just trying to restock the honey jasmine teacups when you notice something odd. There's mist, not steam, not incense. Mist. It curls around the floor like a bashful cat, swirling beneath chairs and delicately brushing ankles. At first, you think maybe one of your new spa treatments went rogue again. Perhaps the cloud fluff reboot got a little too ambitious. But then you see him. He's always been a loyal customer. Comes in every week. Orders the same thing, tranquilly tea with a side of whisker wind massage. Tipped generously. Smelled faintly of frankincense and existential dread. Perfectly normal, really. Except now. He is completely enveloped in mist. Not walking through it, generating it. Every time he exhales, more fog. Every time he blinks, a puff of condensed calmness. He's basically a portable weather system at this point. Naturally, guests adore it. One visitor comments, it's like sitting next to a peaceful thundercloud. Another whispers, his aura fog cured my overthinking. Soon, others start following him around, hoping for a quick moment inside his mist radius. One couple books an entire quiet corner just to sit in his vapor trail. You have to start using reservations. And the mist guy, totally unbothered. He just sips his tea, fogging the cup, the table, the chair, the ceiling. The spa cat lounges on his shoulder like a floaty in a dream. Of course, this causes logistical problems. The scroll menus go limp in the humidity. The mirror in the powder room now reflects nothing but haze. One of the tea jars goes missing and is found days later, still sealed, in a cloud pocket hovering midair. You consider asking him to tone it down, but he looks so deeply relaxed. It seems almost cruel to interfere. And honestly, scholars still argue whether becoming mist is a sign of ultimate spiritual ascension or just a mild allergic reaction to lavender steam. So you try to let the mist thing slide. After all, no one's complaining. The spa's never been more serene. And the fog guest, as some have started calling him, tips in dew drops now, which is apparently a rare celestial currency backed by mourning. But then the mountain itself sends feedback. It starts small. A polite rumble during tea hours. A gentle seismic shrug during foot soaks. You assume it's indigestion. Mountains eat weather, probably. That's a thing, right? Then comes the note, written in shifting moss across the garden rocks. A passive-aggressive message you can't unsee. Consider a quieter ambience. Also, fewer chimes. Sign the hill. At first, you think maybe a guest wrote it. But the moss reforms if you brush it off. The message updates daily, like a newsletter. Still echoing too much. My cliffs are vibrating. Sincerely, the entire slope. Even the spa cat blinks twice at that one. You make changes. Softer bells. Muffling spells on the teapots. A sign encouraging indoor whispers even outdoors. But nothing satisfies the hill. Soon, when someone claps politely for a towel folding demo, a minor tremor answers. One morning, a section of the hot stone path rearranges itself into the shape of a very large frown. You take the hint. A peace offering is arranged. Fresh herb bundles for the soil, a day of silence, and the promise of installing echo-absorbing moss panels in the echo chamber, ironically named. To your surprise, the hill responds with a gentle uphill breeze and a soft poppy blooming in the shape of a thumbs up. And just like that, balance returns for now. Though scholars still argue whether mountain communication is environmental sentience or just excellent branding by ancient landscape designers. You're barely over the drama with a mountain when the next situation bubbles up, quite literally. It begins with a sneeze. Not yours. Not a guess. No, this one erupts from the goblin, your eccentric co-host/steam manager, who had been sampling a new blend of chamomile papyrus tea with questionable side effects. He sneezes once. The kind of sneeze that makes clouds flinch. And suddenly, part of the hillside collapses, not in a destructive way, but in a gentle, spa-friendly manner. The rocks soften like butter left in morning sun, the soil ripples like soup, and when the dust settles, there's a brand new jacuzzi cradled in the earth, perfectly circular and already bubbling. A nearby bamboo sign spontaneously carves the words. Steam of Destiny. You both stare at it for a full minute. The goblin sniffs once, humbly, as if apologizing to the terrain. Guests arrive within hours. No one even asks if it's safe. Something about the shape, the gentle fizz, the faint scent of cinnamon. It lures them in like moths to a warm foot bath. One guest claims the bubbles are whispering riddles. Another swears the jacuzzi restored their memory of a dream about dancing flamingos in business suits. You name it whimsy pool and add it to the spa map, drawn in watercolor, of course. Scholars still argue whether divine sneezes have always been part of mythic topography, or if this goblin just rewrote the steamier parts of legend by sheer nasal force. Regardless, you now stock tissues made from silk and stardust. Just in case. And the goblin. He's forbidden from sneezing near fault lines, but encouraged to drink tea over reinforced tiles. Balance, after all, is the soul of serenity. You're adjusting a cloud hammock when the goblin bursts through the herb-scented curtains, waving a bamboo slip in the air like it's an ancient scroll announcing doom. Except it isn't doom. It's a flyer for something called bamboo slipper yoga. You raise one eyebrow. He raises both. And that's how it begins. Within hours, the forest clearing behind the spa transforms into a meditation lawn. Mats made from woven lotus fibers, bells that chime only when someone contemplates breakfast, and of course, the piece de resistance, bamboo slippers on every guest's feet. Now, these slippers are not ordinary. They are ridiculously oversized, squeaky, and slightly magical. Each pair insists on shuffling with dramatic flair. Your first yoga session begins with 17 guests slipping, spinning, and laughing their way into vaguely sacred poses like stretched cat pretending not to fall asleep and lotus who forgot its petals. The goblin leads the class with baffling grace, balancing upside down on one toe, a towel on his head shaped like Mount Fuji. The fox spirit joins too, muttering something about core strength and scandalous stretching. One guest cartwheels into a bush, and claims they glimpsed the true meaning of tea. You can't argue with results. By the end of the week, bamboo slipper yoga becomes the third most requested service, right after the rain cloud nap booth and the whispered affirmation tunnel. Scholars still argue whether movement enhances divine focus, or if this is all a cleverly disguised comedy show hosted by forest deities. Either way, you design certificates that say certified in clumsy enlightenment. They're printed on recycled scrolls and sealed with pressed lavender. And the goblin. He now offers advanced courses, spa lunges of the tranquil elk. You're still recovering from downward snoring otter.